Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in this video, I'll talk about forms in React. So what are the different ways of creating forms in React? So basically there are two ways. One is using control component. Another one is that using uncontrolled component. So I will give you demo of both of these ones, and I'll also talk about what are the pros of these ones. And after that, we'll talk about how you can add validation to the form. So to add validation, we'll not be using any external library like React hook form or Formic. Instead, we will be using the features of JavaScript and React, and we'll see how you can add validation to the form using that only. And after that, at the end of the video, I'll talk about some of the best practices that you should be following when we are dealing with forms in React. So now let's get started. And here is the application that we will be building today. So we have a simple form. We have username, email, and job role. So username here, it only takes the characters. It does not take the special character. So if we type some special character here, and email and job role we provided, if we submit that, we are saying, if we click on OK, we are saying that username cannot contain special character. So we are getting this error message. So if you don't pass anything, if we try to submit the form, we can see the username is required. So based on the different types of validation, we are getting different error message. And the same thing can be done for the email as well. For the email, if we pass some invalid email address and if we try to submit it, and then we can see the email address is invalid. So this is how you can create a form validation. So this demo we will be seeing in this today's example. So now let's start. Okay, so now in order to start, I have created a blank React project using Vite, and I have written some boilerplate code there. So I'll just quickly show you. So I have created a simple form. On the right side, you can see we have a username field, we have an email field, and we have a field known as job role, in which we have two options, which is that tester and developer. So here is the form that we have created. So now if you want to follow along, then I have created, I have shared that boilerplate code here. Here is the boilerplate code. I will share the link in the description. You can follow if you want. So first I will show you how you can extract the data from this field and we can show it in the console. So now let's try to figure out that. So we have three fields: username, email, and job role. So what I will do is that I will create three state, and in that state I will store the value that we get from username, email, and job role. So let's create that. So now what we will do is that we will set whatever the value that user is providing, we will set that value to the state. So here I will create a onChange event handler, and this function will take a parameter called event, and we will use event.target.value. This way, whatever input that user will type here in the username, that value will be stored in the username state here in this thing. So we'll do the same thing for the other two also. So now here what we have done is that we have created three onChange event handler. So that means whenever the user is typing something or user is setting some value, we will store that value in the state. Okay. So now what we will do is that we will create a function that will run when the user submits that form. So we will give that function name as handle submit. In this function, we will have access to these three states. So I'll just console log them. What I will do is that I will attach this function here. So on submit. Okay, now let me refresh this page. And now what we will do is that, one more thing is that we will have to prevent the default behavior of the form. So basically, whenever you are creating a form in HTML, so whenever you submit that form actually refreshes the page. So that is the default behavior of the form, but we don't want that. We don't want the page to be refreshed. So that's why we will just prevent that default behavior. So we can do it like this, event.prevent default. So now if we refresh the screen, so let's enter anything, say this, and now this. Now if you submit this, so yeah, so if you can see that whenever you are submitting that form, so this handle submit, this function is running, and inside that we have the access to whatever data that user has inputted. We have access to that data, and now we can display it in the console. So yeah, this is working fine, but here is one issue, is that we are not doing any validation. So it is always necessary to do form validation, because we cannot trust the user input data, because user can always pass the malicious data. So we should always make sure that the data is validated. So yeah, so for that, form validation is very important, and in this case we'll only do the client side validation, but it is also important to do the server side validation as well. So now let's see how you can add some validation to this form. So our form is working fine, but it is lacking validation. So I'll show you the problem. So basically, suppose you entered something here, now you entered something here, now if you submit that, so it is saying that okay. So that is actually because we had passed this field. If you see this email thing, this thing, we have passed the type as email. So when you pass the type as email, so HTML does some inbuilt validation. So we want to, we want to stop that. So for that, you can pass a valid parameter called no validate. So now if we refresh the screen, now if we say we pass any username, we pass any invalid email, now you can select the job role. Now if you submit that, you can see the data is still being submitted. So you can see the email is showing this. So this is not a valid email. Okay. So we want to stop that. So that is why validation is important. Okay. So now let's see how you can add some validation to this form. So what validation we will do is that we want that username, this field username, we don't want to pass here any special character here. And in the email, we already know the email should be in valid format, and this thing, this job role, we want at least one value to be selected from here. So these are the validations. So let's see how we can do that. Okay, so first of all, what we will do is that we will create 3 state. So basically we will create 3 state, and in that state we will store the errors for specific fields. Okay, so now let's create that. So now we have created these 3 state, and in this 3 state we will store the validation errors. So now we will create 3 functions that will validate the input field. So one function will validate the username, another will validate the email, and another will validate the job role. So let's create that. Now here to validate the username, so in username we don't want to show any special character. So now let's do that. So for that I'll be using regular function. So I will be using this regular function, this thing. So here we will check if the username is matching with that pattern, this regular expression, this pattern. So let's do that. The regular expression actually takes a function called test, so we can compare any text with that pattern. Now if the username like the matches with this pattern, then that means the value is correct, the username is in correct format. This thing does return false, then only we want to populate the error. So we'll populate the error like set username error. And we can also do one thing, is that and what we will do is that we will return a boolean value from this function. So we'll create a boolean value like let is username valid. So initialize it with true, and now if it returns this, we will just make it as false. Use username becomes false, and we will return that here. And we will return this thing, is username valid. And one more thing is that when this function runs, at first we want to reset the error. So here we have created a function that will basically validate the username. So basically if the username is empty, then it will give this message username is required, and if it is If it requires like if the username contains some special character, then we will give this thing. So in the same manner, we will also write the validation function for the email and the job role as well. So now let's do that. Now here, in order to validate the email, we will use a new regular expression. So here is the regular expression that we will be using here in this case. So we will create a same variable is email valid, initialize it true, and we will make it as false, is set it as false. Okay, and now we'll return that. And here when this function runs, we want to reset the email error. So in the same way, here we have created this validate email function as well. So here what we will do is that basically we have a regular function, regular expression. So we are just checking if the email is blank, then we are throwing this message, and if the email is in some different format, invalid email address, then we are showing this error message. So now we will create the same type of error message for the job role as well. That will basically validate the job role. So basically we are checking if the job role is developer or tester. We are not throwing any error. If the job role is something other than that, then we are just making the job role as invalid, and we will throw the error. So like that, we have created these three functions: validate job role, validate username, and validate email. So now we will use this function to handle the errors. That means, so when user tries to submit the form, so before that we will be using these three, and we will check if the data is valid. If the data is valid, then only we will allow the user to submit the form. So actually these three functions, this validate email, validate username, these returns boolean value. So I will be creating three variables. So now what we will do is that we have invoked these three functions, and we have got the data. So now what we will do is that if these three things are valid, that means the value of is username valid, this variable, this and this, these three value are true, that means all the values are correct. So then only we want to allow the user to submit the form. So we'll create a if condition here. When all these things are true, then only we allow the user to submit the form. So I'll just move these three console logs above, and else we want to show some error message, something like form data is incorrect. So now let's try to run this program and let's see if it is working fine or not. I'll refresh the screen and I will enter something. First of all I will try to enter the proper data and I'll submit it. It is submitting. Now if I say just any random data, incorrect email, now if we submit that, you are getting an error message called the form data is incorrect. Okay, so that's expected. Now if we correct it, then if we submit it, we are able to submit it. Now let's try the username. So ideally we should not be using any special character in the username, so I'll just use some random special character. Now if we try to submit it, it is showing that the form data is incorrect, which is expected. Now if we just remove the special character, now try to submit it, yeah, the form is submitting. Okay, So now if we don't select any job role and then we try to submit the form, yeah, so we are getting that error message. Now if we select any job role and submit it, then we are able to submit the form. So yeah, so this was a simple example about how you can implement, validation in React. So basically what it is doing, I'll just quickly give you an overview of this. So we have a simple form here, and what we have done is that when we are typing that value, we are setting that value to the state, we are storing the value to the state. So we have created 3 state: username, email and job role, and then we have handled that data in the handle submit. Now we have also implemented the error handling, that means the validation. So we have created 3 state, and in this 3 state we will be storing that error messages. So we have created 3 function: validate username, validate email and validate job role. So these 3 function will check if the username is correct, email is correct or job role is correct. So here you can see we have used the regular expression, and using that we have checked if that the username that the user entering, if it is matches with that pattern or not. If it is matching with that pattern, then it is fine. Then if it is not matching with that pattern, then there is some mistake in that, we are just showing some error. So like that, the same thing we have done in the validate email and in the validate job role as well. So this is how you can simply implement a form validation in React. So I just realized one more thing is that, so if the user is submitting some incorrect data, so we are showing this message form data is incorrect, but we are not actually telling the user what went wrong. So in which field that does the user need to make change. So now let's do that. So what we will do is that we will just show these error messages. So say let's suppose when the username is incorrect format. So in this case we will be showing that error message. So I'll just write the error message here. So I want the error message to be shown when the user name error presents, and I will create a p tag, and inside that I will just show the error, and I will also add a class name error. And here I have already created a class name. Okay, let me create a class name called error, so that user can easily see the error messages. Okay, so let me do the same thing for the other two as well. Let me add it here for email, and let me add it for here as well for job role. Okay, let me refresh this page now. Now if we submit some dummy data here, now if we add some special character which is not allowed, now let's try to submit the form. We are getting the error. Yeah, so when you click on OK, then you are seeing that the username, we are actually seeing the proper error message. Okay, now let's see if we pass a blank thing here. Suppose we are not passing anything in username. If we submit that, if we click on OK, so then also we are seeing this message, but actually it should be showing the username is in blank. So let's see what went wrong. Okay, so actually the thing is, so we have to change the sequence of this these two if statements. Okay, so if I move it up, then that should fix the issue. Now let's try to refresh the screen. I will not pass anything here, and let me submit it. Yeah, username is required. So now you are getting the proper error message. So let's check for the email as well. Now yeah, for the email also we are getting the correct message. So this is how you can build a simple form validation in a React application. And here we are not using any other external library for the validation. We are only using the feature that is already present in React and JavaScript. And one more thing is that the technique that we used here, this thing is known as the controlled component. That means whatever the user data that user is typing, we are storing that data in the state. So when we are handling that, we are storing that data in the state, that is called actually the control component. And that is the recommended way of handling forms in React. And if you see the React documentation page, so this is the React documentation page. So you can see here also they have said that in most of the cases we recommend using control component. You can see in most of the cases we recommend using control component to implement from. So yeah, so this is one thing. So basically when we are using control component, we have better control on the data because the data is being stored in the state only. So we have better control of the data. So that is one advantage of using the control component. Yeah, so that was about the control component, but control component has some downside as well. So which is basically I will show you. So if you see this input fields here, you can see in this thing on the on change we are basically whenever the user is typing something, we are setting that data in the state. That means whenever the user is typing something and this thing as so basically for every keystroke that state gets updated. That means that state gets updated, that means the entire component gets re-rendered. So that means whenever the user is typing something here, with every one keystroke that entire component, this entire app component gets re-rendered. And that can be a problem because for in this case we have only 3 fields, so it's not a big problem. But suppose you have a you have a large form where you have maybe 50 fields. So in that case, if you are typing, like you are using this thing, you are using control component and you are so you are typing this value. So for every keystroke, that entire component will be re-rendered. That means your entire form will be re-rendered, and that might need to that might lead to some performance issues as well. Well, React is pretty fast and it can handle this re-render pretty well, but sometimes it might cause some issues when you have lots of fields. So that is one thing when you are using control component. So that is one thing you need to keep in mind. But if you use uncontrolled component, which I will show you next, so if you use uncontrolled component, in that case you do not have this problem. That means in that uncontrolled component, with every keystroke we are not re-rendering the entire page. But again, for the uncontrolled component also, it has its own downsides as well, so we'll talk about that. Okay, so in this case, now what we will do is that we will convert this form into uncontrolled component. So what uncontrolled component does is that in this uncontrolled component, we do not store the data in the state. Instead, we store the data in the DOM and we query the DOM and we can get the value from the DOM. So now let's see how we can convert this form using into the uncontrolled component. And in uncontrolled component, there is a hook. In React, there is a hook called useRef. So we'll use that. We'll remove these 3 things. So we have these 3 state where we are storing that value. So we'll just remove that and instead we will create ref. So I'll just show you. So let me create a ref for the username. And we will be using the useRef hook from the React. So like that, you can use that. So I'll create for the other ones as well. So just note that here in the uncontrolled component, instead of state, we are using ref. So we have created the refs. Now what we will do is that we will so basically the HTML elements have a property called ref. So we will store this ref here. So here now this on change is not required. So remove that. And there is a property called ref. So inside that we will pass that ref. So suppose this is for username ref. And for the other ones also we will just set that. So for this also this on change is not required now, because in on change what we are doing is that in on change we are just setting the value to the state, but in the uncontrolled component we are not using the state, so we don't need that. We'll write it here to email ref. And for this one also we'll remove this thing and ref to job role ref. Yeah. Okay, so this is done. So what we have done, we have created these 3 ref and we have just assigned it ref's value to that value, like that. So now what you have to do is that now, so earlier what we are doing is that we are just storing that value in the state. So we are getting the whatever user has input, whatever user has typed, so we are getting that data using the state. But here we will not be using that, we will be using ref. So we have to use this ref to get whatever value user has typed. the other thing will not be making any changes because we will be using the same validator function. We will be using these functions only, validate username, email, a job role, these things only. So just the difference is that how you are getting that value. So here username, instead of username it will be username ref, and the ref has a property called current. So we have to use that. And inside the current we have a property called value. So this is how you can get the current value of the ref. So we'll just do that here also. So this is how we are getting that value here. So basically what we are doing is we are doing the same thing only. So we are just validating the username, email and job role, and this is how you can get the value of the ref. Yeah, so here you have to change it. So just to show the username, you have to make it like that. Let me refresh the screen now. I think it looks good to me. I think it should work now. Now let's give it a try. I'll just type something here, and now okay, it is working. So if we just give some incorrect data, some special character, submit that, the form data is incorrect, and we are getting that correct message. Now if we don't pass anything here, if we just submit it, then also we are getting this. Okay, yeah, so we are getting the correct error message here. Let's try for the email field as well. If we submit it, we are getting this pop-up and we are getting the email is invalid. Yeah, so we are getting the the correct format. Yeah, so for the job role also it is working. So basically what we have done is that the main difference between the refs, the main difference between the control component and uncontrolled is that we are not using the state here. So we are using refs to store the value, and for the to store the error message we are using state, but to store the value that user has input, for that case we are not using state, we are using ref, and then you have to set that ref uh, to that specific input element which we have done here, ref to this, and after that you when you want to get the value that user has typed, to get that value you have to use ref, whatever ref that you have passed, ref dot current dot value. So using that you can get the value whatever user has input typed, and then we can basically we can validate the value. You can check that if the value is correct in proper format or not, and after that we can submit our form. So this is how you can create a form using uncontrolled component. So here the benefit is so we are storing the input data in the ref. So that means as the user is typing here, so it is not actually refreshing the screen, it is not actually re-rendering the component, because we are not storing the data in the state, instead we are storing the data in the ref, so it is not re-rendering the component. So that can help in performance improvement. But since we are storing the data in the DOM, in the ref, so we don't have much control on that data. So that is one thing you have to keep in mind. In if we summarize, we can say that the control component gives better control over the data, but it may have some performance issues whenever you have some large form. On the other hand, the uncontrolled component, uncontrolled form, they helps in performance improvement, but again we don't have much control over the data. So yeah, that's about the difference between the pros and cons between the control component and uncontrolled component. Okay, so now let's talk about some of the tips and tricks and some of the best practices while handling forms in React. So the first thing is that I think we should be using control component, most of the cases at least, because in control component we are storing the data inside the state, and since the storing the data in the state, so we have better control on the data, and also we can handle errors effectively while you are using a control component. And the second thing is that I think it makes sense to use some of the the libraries to handling forms, like the React hook form or Formic, all those libraries. I think it makes sense to use them because these libraries handles a lot of things for you, especially the validation part. So you don't have to write your custom validation. You can write, like you can use this library and you can implement the validation very easily. And also these libraries can handle some performance issues as well. So as I was talking about, like in the control component, whenever you are typing something, the component gets re-rendered unnecessarily. So that thing can be tackled by using these libraries easily. And the third thing that I have is that always make sure you are also doing the server-side validation as well. So whenever you are using form, it's necessary to do the client-side validation, but the client-side validation can easily be bypassed. And hence, it's very important that we also doing the server-side validation as well. So that was about how you can handle forms in React and you can add validation to that. So I hope this video was useful, and if this video was useful to you and you have learned something new, then please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also make sure to comment down about your doubts or whatever next topic that you want me to cover. That's it for today from my end. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.